You went and got your hearing checked. You sat in that quiet booth and raised your hand every time you heard a beep, or maybe pressed the button when you heard the beep. And at the end, the audiologist handed you the results and said, well, your hearing's normal. So why can't you understand anything in a noisy restaurant? Why do you ask people to repeat themselves at family dinners? And why does every group conversation feel like you're trying to decode a different language? Well, you're not imagining it, and you're not a bad listener. I'm Dr. Layne Garrett, founder of Timpanogos Hearing and Tinnitus in Utah, and I've been treating hearing loss for over 20 years, and this is one of the most frustrating situations that I see. People that have been told their hearing is fine, but they know something isn't right. Today, I'm going to explain exactly what's happening, why the standard hearing test is missing it, and what actually needs to be done to find the problem. Let's start with what the standard audiogram or standard hearing test actually measures, because most people don't know. When you sit in that booth and listen for beeps, the test is measuring your hearing thresholds, the softest sounds you can detect at different pitches. Quiet, pure tones, no talking, no competing sound, no real world. And if your thresholds look normal, the test says you passed. The problem is that's not how hearing works outside the clinic. You're not at a dinner table listening for beeps. You're at that table with 4 conversations happening all at the same time. You're in a meeting with the air conditioner noise in the background, and you're at a party trying to follow what someone 2 feet away is saying. The audiogram was never designed to measure that. It tells us almost nothing about how your auditory system handles speech and noise, and yet most clinics treat it like the final word on your hearing. Maybe someone has told you, your hearing's fine, you probably just need to pay better attention. But let's be honest, you've been paying attention harder than everyone else in the room for a long time. You're reading lips, you're choosing the seat with the least background noise, and you're trying to guess what you missed from the context. You've stopped asking people to repeat themselves because asking for the 5th time is kind of embarrassing, so you just nod. You laugh along when you miss the joke, hoping that no one notices. And by the time you get home from dinner, you're not just tired, you're drained. You've told yourself, maybe I'm distracted. Maybe it's just that I'm getting older. Maybe everyone else really is mumbling. But what if it isn't an attention problem? And what if it's not normal aging? And what if the test you were given measured whether you can hear beeps in a quiet room, but not whether you can understand speech in the real world? That's not a minor gap, that's the whole problem. If this kind of straight clinical explanation is useful, real answers, instead of hearing your hearing test is normal, you're fine, hit subscribe. I make videos every week about hearing loss, tinnitus, and what tests are really important to explain what patients are experiencing in their real life. So what is actually going on? There are a few possible explanations. 2 of the most clinically important are hidden hearing loss and central auditory processing problems, and both can be missed entirely when the only test you receive is a standard audiogram. The first is something researchers called cochlear syntapathy. Think of it this way. The ear may still detect sounds, but the wiring that connects the complex sound clearly to the brain has been damaged. Specifically the synaptic connections between the nerve endings in your inner ear and the auditory nerve fibers. When you're exposed to noise over time, concerts, power tools, years of loud work environments, those connections can be damaged even when the nerve endings themselves survive. Your hearing test looks normal because your threshold detection is still intact, but the nerve fibers responsible for processing speech and competing noise, they get compromised. The signal gets through fine when it's a single beep in a quiet room, but falls completely apart when there's competing sounds around. A 2024 review in hearing research described this as a synapse loss that silences large numbers of cochlear neurons while remaining invisible to routine audiometric testing, because it doesn't affect threshold detection, only performance under demanding listening conditions. The second possibility is central auditory processing disorders, where the peripheral hearing system is intact, but the brain's ability to process complex auditory signals isn't working right anymore. This can also produce a normal hearing test with real significant difficulty hearing and noise. In both cases, the standard test misses it entirely, and in both cases, the person walks away being told they're fine. This isn't about being frustrated at restaurants. A 2022 study using data from the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging followed over 700 adults aged 60 and older. They measured both standard audiometric hearing and speech and noise performance tests using the Quicksin, then tracked cognitive function over time. People with poor speech and noise scores showed worse performance across multiple cognitive domains, language, memory, and executive function, and faster decline than those with better scores of hearing and noise, even after controlling for audiometric hearing status. The researchers concluded that speech and noise performance may be a more sensitive marker for memory decline than the standard hearing test. A 2025 follow-up from that same data set followed 1,128 participants and found that poor hearing and noise scores predicted future deterioration in audiometric thresholds. In other words, struggling to hear today may be an early warning that measurable hearing loss is coming soon. I need to be precise here though. This does not mean difficulty in noise causes cognitive decline. The relationship is more complex than that, but it does mean this is a real finding that deserves clinical attention, not a shrug and a normal result. So what should actually happen when someone comes in with this complaint? The first thing I want to know is how well they perform on speech and noise testing. The QuickSIN, the Quick Speech and Noise Test, presents sentences embedded in competing voices at decreased signal-to-noise ratios. It measures how well you understand speech as the noise gets louder. That's the real-world function that a standard hearing test misses completely. And what frustrates me is that this test remains far from routine. Some survey data suggests that only 10% of audiologists use the QuickSIN consistently, and even if that number is improving, a 2024 paper in Ear and Hearing still felt the need to formally propose replacing standard word recognition testing with the speech and noise measures as the default. The fact that that proposal had to be written in a journal tells you where we still are. Beyond just that though, I want to talk about extended high-frequency testing. Pitches above the standard 8,000 Hz range, where early nerve damage often shows up first, and otoacoustic emissions testing to get a clearer picture of nerve ending function separate from the neural picture. Together these give a more complete account of what's really happening. None of this is all that exotic. These are available clinical tools. They're just not being used consistently. When you're looking for help with your hearing, ask a specific question. Do you do speech and noise testing? If the answer is no, or if they're not sure what you're asking, that clinic may not be equipped to properly evaluate your hearing problem. A patient came in a couple of years ago. He was about 50 years old and he was a contractor, and he'd had his hearing tested 3 different times in the last 3 years, and he'd been told his hearing was normal every time. And every time after the appointment, he left without an answer for why he could not follow conversations on the job site or hear what his wife was saying in the car. He told me it was worse when he was driving, that his wife would say something from the passenger seat, but the road noise would rise above the speech and he'd catch maybe half of what she was saying. After a while, she thought he just wasn't listening. He started to think maybe she was right. So we did a full evaluation. His audiogram was normal, but his quick speech and noise score showed a significant signal-to-noise deficit. He needed speech to be much louder than background noise just to understand what was being said. That explained everything he'd been experiencing. We couldn't hand him a single fix, but now we knew what we were actually treating. We worked on hearing and noise strategies, noise protection going forward, auditory training, and environmental modifications, and he left with a real picture and a real path forward, which is more than the 3 previous audiologists had given him. He said, "They all told me my hearing was fine, and I was starting to think that I was losing my mind." He wasn't. He just hadn't had the right tests. Drop a comment below. Have you been told that your hearing is normal, but you're still struggling to hear? I want to hear what your experience was like. We've put together a detailed breakdown of what a comprehensive hearing evaluation should include in our free online learning center. No email required, no pressure, just information. The link for that's in the description. And if you're here in Northern Utah and want that proper evaluation, you can schedule an appointment in one of our clinics along the Wasatch Front. You can find a link for that in the description as well. Thanks for watching.